recording button going. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is so wonderful to see you all. If you don't know who we are NYX Horror Collective. We are a women-led community of horror creators. I am Kelly Krause, and I am joined today by the fantabulous Melody Cooper. We are two of the founding members of NYX, and we are so excited to welcome Sara Bennett today. As you all know, because you registered, obviously, Sara is a VFX supervisor. I do just want to do a couple quick housekeeping things before we do our intros and then jump into the moderated Q&A. If you are not Sara or myself or Melody, please keep yourselves muted. For the moderated Q&A portion, there will be an audience Q&A during the last 15 to 20 minutes. So any questions that you have for Sara, please feel free to put those in the chat and we will make sure that you have the opportunity to ask them. Let me see, anything else, Melody, on that front?
No, I think that's it. We can get started.
Okay, excellent. All right, let's tell you a little bit about Sara. So, Sara Bennett is a visual effects supervisor and one of the co-founding owners of Milk, a multi-award-winning independent visual effects company based in London. She became the second ever female VFX Oscar winner when she received the 2016 Academy Award for Best Visual Effects in Alex Garland's EX-MACHINA, which I'm sure is a favorite for many people here. She also received the 2016 BAFTA Film Award nomination for her work in EX-MACHINA. We're going to dive into just a sampling of her credits because they are vast and very impressive. So brace yourselves. Here we go. Sara's VFX and 2D supervisor credits at Milk include Adrift, Annihilation, The Alienist, Kingsman: The Golden Circle, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, High Rise, The Martian, Poltergeist, the Divergent series, Insurgent, Dracula Untold, and Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, to name but a few. She also served independently as overall VFX supervisor on Netflix's The Old Guard. Prior to the launch of Milk, Sara was the head of 2D at Mill TV and Film, where she worked as a VFX supervisor on several feature films, including Les Miserables, 28 Weeks Later, and Dredd, the 2012 adaptation of the popular Judge Dredd comic book franchise. Her TV credits include, but are not limited to, BAFTA Television Craft Awards for her supervising on BBC's Merlin and Doctor Who, your favorite doctor and mine. Sara, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And so I just have to say, wow, because I'm one that's so impressive. I'm a huge fan of your work, and as Kelly mentioned, NYX Horror Collective supports women working in the horror genre, but also we want to amplify the work of women who people may not know about. And people should know about you and what you've done and what you've brought to the industry. As an artist and also as a woman. So thank you again. And I'd love to get started by just finding out from you how you got your start in special effects, what drew you to it, and also like to know who your mentors have been along the way.
So originally I trained as a makeup artist. I fell in love with films like Legends and Labyrinth, those kind of films, and so prosthetics was the way that I thought I wanted to go. So I didn't really know much about visual effects at that point. So I trained as a makeup artist. I moved to London and I looked around trying to get work kind of in that area, but it was really difficult and very specialised at that time. Anyway, I ended up working with a company called NEFX, which were a physical effects company. But they did like weekend courses, bringing like professionals in from the industry, makeup artists. So I thought that was a good way to kind of break into it. Anyway, while I was at this company, I started talking to this Scottish guy that was part of the team, and he started talking to me about digital effects and that side, that computer effects. And I was like, oh, that sounds quite interesting actually. And he said to me, but you'll absolutely hate it. it's full of men, and you know they're all geeks, and it's just not something you'll probably be really into. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute, actually that sounds quite intriguing. So the stubborn side of me went down that route, and I started exploring it, and eventually found myself a job as a runner in a company, and just sort of gradually worked my way up as a compositor, and you know, so forth, and then into supervising, and that's really how I got into it.
Great. And I'm curious, how were you treated as a woman learning as you moved up into different roles, and as a supervisor? What was that like?
I mean, I've been asked this question so many times, and it's whether or not I was completely oblivious to it, but I never found it an issue. In fact, if anything, it went in my favour because it was kind of very male dominated. I don't think I was seen as any threat. So, you know, I found like a lot of people would help me and sort of teach me, which was great. So I never obviously noticed any issues with me being female or it causing any problems for me, to be honest. You know, and I know other people, I've spoken to other women, you know, they've had different issues, which I totally respect. You know, and I feel very lucky that I didn't have any of those problems. You know, well, like I said, maybe I was unaware of it going on around me. So I've never had an issue, I guess, being female.
Well, I think part of that is the world is changing, it's slowly, but and it's encouraging because there are men who it isn't a problem for them. I mean, we shouldn't assume that it's always going to be a problem. When it is, we should point it out, but that's actually encouraging to hear, I think. So I'm curious about what your process is when you begin to work on a film. How do you start? You know, after you are actually, how does it start from the very beginning, from when you're even engaged to work on a project and your connection with the director, how you work with the director, and how your input in particular drives how the visual effects are going to be developed for the film?
So it always starts with you know, I'd be sent a script. So, you know, we read that and then we kind of break it down, look at it and sort of see, you know, what we think would be visual effects, or what I would think would be visual effects, or what could potentially be, you know, shot for real. We kind of do that stage. And then, you know, like on the Old Guard, for example, I met up with Gina initially, you know, before being offered the job. She was just kind of doing the rounds and meeting people. So you kind of have to have that initial meeting, see if there's a rapport between you, you know, because obviously you work very closely together. So you have to kind of like each other and want to work together, obviously. So, you know, that going ahead, break down the scripts, and then what we do is sit down in a pre-production meeting with everybody, and it'd be HODs, which are like heads of department. So you'd have, you know, stunts, makeup, costume, camera, DOP, and then you go through the scripts and look at these breakdowns, you know, what I'd done as visual effects or what I thought would be visual effects. And then we discuss, well, actually, you know, we can go to this location and shoot this, so we wouldn't need this to be a visual effect. Or there's this part in the story, like, let's say, for example, on the Old Guards where they regenerate, you know, obviously that has to be generated as VFX and a little bit of makeup here and there, obviously. So it's kind of just sitting down and breaking down the script and working out what's the best way to shoot it. And then, you know, it's just all about conversation and collaboration and working out the best way to tell the story and get these images up on the screen, basically.
Great. And do you prefer digital or practical effects, or I just wonder if you have a preference?
I think they're both, you know, where they're needed, to be honest. I don't think everything should be a visual effect. You know, I think there's some things look better practically and shot for real, you know, with enhancement of VFX or vice versa. So I don't really have a preference. It's kind of what works to help tell the story.
Mm-hmm. Now, the two films that are the favorites of many of us in the room, and me and many in Nick's Horror Collective, are Annihilation and EX-MACHINA. And I wanted to know how you came to work on those films, and you know, what was it like working on them, and some of the biggest challenges that you had.
So I was really lucky. Well, not lucky. I mean, I worked with Alex Garland originally. So I did 28 Weeks Later, which he wrote, obviously. I never met him at that point. But then he made he became part of the director. You know, he did some of the direction on Dread. He wrote that, and he was director on it as well. So I got introduced to him on that show at the time as a vendor with another studio. So I first met him, you know, and he's an amazing man, like really such a clever man, and he's very loyal as well. So we worked together on that film, and you know, we had a good relationship on that. So when he created Ex-MACHINA, or wrote Ex-MACHINA, he invited me, you know, to sort of come in on the film along with Andrew Whitehurst for DNEG, and that's kind of how it started. You know, how I got to get onto Ex-MACHINA, which I'm very grateful for. And again, the same thing with Annihilation, because we, you know, you've built up that relationship and work closely together. You know, you tend to work with the same kind of crew, which is nice. And that's how it works, you know, build up these relationships. So that was how I got into Ex-MACHINA and Annihilation, from that early job that I did with him. And it was great, both really good projects. You know, and he's so clever and such a good writer, you know, and Ex-MACHINA was a really clever, you know, brilliant, like wonderful sci-fi film. So, and there's nothing better than, you know, being part of the team on a really good film, you know, good visual effects, all of it was good direction, good writing, you know, it was kind of a privilege to be part of. So yeah, but that's kind of how I got onto them.
And then it culminated in an Academy Award. So what, it's, you know, that was so wonderful. When I didn't know who you were, but when I found out about that at the time, I was so happy. What was that like? That you know, I know it was joyous and wonderful, but just want to talk a little bit about winning the Academy Award.
Yeah, it was completely crazy. I mean, it was like such an amazing week. I mean, so in the year, I think at the end of 2015, I think it was like December time, and DNA, who were the production company for Ex-MACHINA, there's a lady there called Claire St. John, and she called me up just before Christmas. She's like, "Oh, congratulations!" And I was like, "I'm sorry." She went, "Yeah, congratulations. You know, you've been nominated for Ex-MACHINA." I was like, "Really?" Like totally unaware of it. And from there, it kind of was a bit of a whirlwind. So let's put like reels together and, you know, do all this prep. And anyway, I forgot about it over Christmas. And then the first sort of nominations came out with the first, you know, the 20 top films. And I was like, wow, we made it into that, you know, and that was a privilege. It was great. And then you get down to the 10. And then I think when we got down to the, when they picked their sort of final 4 films or 5 films, can't remember now, everybody was like really excited, and it was like, I was so nervous. I was like, I can't deal with this. So I ended up going to the gym while they were reading out all the nominations. And as I came out of the gym, I was like, oh, it's really quiet. Then, you know, clearly we haven't been picked at all. And then my phone started going crazy, and it was like, congratulations, you know, you've been nominated. So from there, I think just the nomination, because we were the underdogs of that year, because there's so many good films in that category. We just kind of put on the head, you know, it's like, let's go, what a great experience, you know, to go to the Oscars and even just to be nominated with such high caliber films. So we didn't really, kind of took it all in our stride and didn't really overthink it. So yeah, when it got called out, it was complete shock, but I mean, wonderful, like a great shock. And it's kind of a bit of a blur from that point onwards. I remember points throughout the night, but it's just like totally surreal. But you know, it's also been amazing because it opened up a lot of doors. You know, as soon as you win an Oscar, suddenly everybody knows who you are. Yeah. And I think a lot of the opportunities that have come, you know, over the last few years has been because of winning an Oscar, obviously. Kind of puts you on the map and people know your name. So I'm like, you know, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. So it's been great. Yeah, it was good.
Good. Kelly, I know you had a question about, we also saw Possessor, which had such wonderful visual effects in it, which have gotten a lot of notice. So I know, Kelly, you had a question, didn't you?
Yeah, I do. So I just watched it the other week and I loved it. I thought it was amazing, especially your handiwork, Sarah. And that's really been the most notable reaction that I've noticed to Possessor, is the visual effects. And any article or review that I find and read on it, it's visual effects that they're just stunning. So in a film that is filled with beautifully unsettling effects, you know, the faces melting, bodies merging, copious amounts of blood, etc. Yeah. Which is your favorite and why?
So I wasn't personally involved with Possessor, so our company, or my company, works on it, and one of my fellow supervisors was actually the supervisor for it. So I watched it, I mean, it was pretty full on, and Cronenberg's, you know, father and son, always a little bit out there anyway. But so, I mean, for me, it's the melting bodies I loved, and that actually wasn't visual effects. It was all done in camera with prosthetics and shot for real, and it looks beautiful. I think the imagery in the film is stunning, like really, really stunning. But the visual effects side, what we did was when he goes into the office with the virtual world, you know, that virtual office. Obviously, a lot of the blood stuff was all enhanced in VFX, a lot of cleanup stuff as well. But honestly, a lot of it was shot with special effects on the day in camera, which is why I think it looks so beautiful. So it's a bit of a combination.
It's
But,
amazing.
yeah.
And obviously you have a you know a very fantastic long established career. You know, you've been working in this for over 2 decades, and so I'm sure it's hard to choose, but is there a favorite visual effect that you were personally responsible for, or like your top 3 or so, whatever?
You know what? It's really hard, actually. You're right. There's been many. I mean, like the first time when I first started the industry was like the Harry Potter films, and one thing I was really proud of as a compositor early on in my career was the I think it was Harry Potter 2 with the spiders in the forest. I loved that. Was the first time I'd really got to kind of, you know, work on a shot in a film by myself. So I'm really proud of that. We also worked on Snow White and the Huntsman, the first one. I think the Mirror Man, I'm really proud of that. Looks absolutely gorgeous still to this day. You know, has aged very well. EX-MACHINA, obviously, I'm always going to be fond of that one. I mean, one of the toughest jobs, which I think is, you know, is one of the hardest shows, was Adrift, because doing water in visual effects is always really difficult to do, and doing storms, like big stormy oceans, is really difficult. So I'm really proud of the work on that, just because it was such a tough project to get through. But yeah, there's so many to list. I like.
I saw Adrift actually recently, and you did a phenomenal job on that. You really had a sense of being in the center of those storms. Loved that. And when you worked on Adrift, was that through Milk, or was that as hired as independently?
No, that was through Milk. So there was an overall supervisor on it called Dardy. So there was Milk and CineSite did the visual effects. So CineSite did everything that wasn't the storm, and Milk did all the oceans and storm. And it's, yeah, I mean, it was the toughest project I think I've worked on in a long time. It was just like the sheer amount of rendering and technique that it was a very technical show, you know, and it was like, the reason I'm proud of it is because the team that works on it works so bloody hard on it, you know, and you know, we worked like endlessly on it for months and months and months. And it's when you're kind of all together working in this room, and it's high stress and, you know, and late hours, and you really want to make it look as good as you can, obviously. So, you know, once you've like worked that hard on something, you want it so it's come out of it looking, you know, wonderful. So, and it works really well. And it is, you know, a very difficult technical job to do. So yeah, I'm really proud of that one.
So how did Milk come about, and what's your involvement in it? And where does it? What kind of projects are you working on with Milk?
So Milk came about. So there's 5 of us that set the company up together. We've all worked together for about, I don't know, 15 years, most of us, 20, some of us, and we were part of the Mill as Mill TV and Film. Anyway, we were like a very small part of the Mill, and obviously the Mill mainly does commercials. So they decided to concentrate on that side of what they do. And closed down the department that we were in. So we were like, oh, you know, what are we going to do now? And we'd always talked about setting up our own company, but it was never the right time, you know, and it's always very risky. But this opportunity came along, and we thought, look, if we don't do it now, you know, we may never do it. So we kind of, you know, put up some money between the 5 of us. We had a show that was going on at the time, which was great. We took over the lease on the building that we were in as part of the Mill, and bought all the software, and just, I think we literally closed down as Mill TV and Film on the Friday and opened up as Milk Visual Effects on the Monday. It was, yeah, it was very weird. I just jumped straight into it, which was great, you know, and I'm really glad we did it because, yeah, it's a difficult thing to get into, and because it was already established in terms of the infrastructure that we had. We just took over essentially what was already set up as our department before. It was an easy transition to do. So that's kind of how Milk, yeah, started really. In terms of, sorry, the end of your question was what projects are we doing?
What kind of projects are you working on within?
So we finished off a lot of the big projects at the end of just before Christmas. So there's a big sci-fi TV show called Intergalactic, which comes out in April, I believe, this year. And then we're just doing a couple of small projects at the moment for TV and one for film. And then essentially, because COVID has kind of put a bit of a spanner in the works, everything we're due to start shooting or working on is kind of in a holding pattern at the moment until, the pandemic kind of calms down a little bit. Just in terms of shooting and practicality of getting everybody together, we're kind of just working through that. So there's a few things going on, but nothing I could actually say the name of right now. Yeah.
I'm curious to know a little more about you, your background, where you're originally from, and what your influences were in terms of film. What you mentioned, some of your favorite films, and that prompted you to want to go into makeup. But I'm just curious what kind of films, horror or sci-fi, that really started out as kind of an inspiration for you.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I love horror and sci-fi, mostly horror, is because as a child, so I grew up in the countryside in the middle of England. It's about 2 hours outside of London, and at the weekends, my father, on a Saturday night, they'd come back from the sort of local pub or whatever with the family, and me and my father would always sit up and watch like Hammer House of Horror and a lot of the old horror films. And I think one of the ones that really sticks in my head that I remember as a kid was the first time I watched The Fog, the original. Which was absolutely terrifying. Can't remember how old I was at the time, but fairly young. And that kind of, piqued the whole horror genre, which I love. And then in terms of, as I got older, I kind of knew I wanted to get into film, but didn't really know where and which direction. But in terms of like influences, which I said earlier, like Legends, I loved. Labyrinth, Poltergeist, I absolutely love the original one. All those kind of films. And Aliens, the second one. I know everybody always goes for Alien as the favourite, but for me it was always the second one of Alien, or Aliens, sorry.
Yeah.
So those were kind of the inspiration for me, that kind of genre which I love. And that's kind of what inspired me, I think, just growing up watching all these films as a kid. Like Dark Crystal as well, the old Dark Crystal film. I think it must have been like 12 and me and my brother watched it. And it was amazing to me. I think, again, which is what we got into prosthetics that I thought at the time is something that I wanted to do. So, all of that was kind of inspirational.
Cool. And is there any project that you've walked away from that you've, that you either, and what was difficult about that, and why might you have decided that it could be that you already had other projects, but is there anything that you for whatever reason, you had to walk away from and it was difficult for you to do that?
No, not really. I hate not finishing something that I've started, so I don't think I've never really walked off anything or walked away from anything.
I mean, something that was offered, not that you were already working on, but did you ever have to turn down something?
No, I don't think so. Nothing that springs to mind that I can think of. No.
Great. I wanted to do what you did.
Sorry, that killed that one off, didn't it?
That's wonderful. I think it's interesting too, because you're working with a company as well, so you have other people who you can delegate to, and they can take on the work. So I wonder too, how do you decide to bring on a visual effects artist? What do you look for? And I'm curious how many women are involved as well.
So before I kind of went into visual effects supervising, and I was just I was the 2D supervisor and manager of the department, which was great because got to hire the people for our department, which was brilliant. And obviously, being female, I always pushed to try and get more women in. Obviously they had to be good, not just because they were female. So that was kind of really important to me, which is why I love having a company as well, because you have that influence on how the company runs and who you get in, and it's really important to me. So I don't know, we've gone through phases where sometimes we've had, I don't know, maybe 60-40 in terms of men to women, and it kind of fluctuates. At the moment, obviously we're down, I think there's maybe about I don't know, I'd say 70-30 in the company at the moment currently. But it's, you know, it's something we're all aware of, you know, in terms of, I mean, all the people I set up the company with are all men, but they're all very proactive in terms of, you know, diversity and mixing things up, which is great and important to them as much as it is to me. So yeah, you're right. It's just keeping an eye on, you know, pushing to get more women in, but obviously you need the women to be qualified as well. So, you know, it's a balance. Yeah. But we definitely try and push, not just for women, just all diversity, to be honest, because it just makes it a more interesting workplace for everybody.
That's great. That's great. And I wanted to dive into Annihilation just a little bit, because that is just such a wildly beautiful, and there's a section of the film where there's hardly any dialogue. It's all visual, and I was curious as to how much of it was pushed, the extent and to which the film was went outside of the box of what we usually see. Is that something that was in discussion before, when you read the script and with the director? How much of it was handled in post, and you know, how much of it was planned beforehand, and how did the trajectory of working on that film go? Because it is so heavily visual.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful, again, stunning visual work. So Annihilation, we came in as a vendor. I wasn't overall on that at all. So it'd already been shot with Andrew Whitehurst, who works very closely with Alex. But in terms of, you know, I know a lot of the work they did on the, you know, the forest stuff with the sort of iridescence on the trees and just treating stuff very subtly. So you get all that lovely sort of color bleed, and it gives you like a style to the film, but done with a really gentle hand, so not kind of in your face visual effects. But yeah, I mean, we came on and we did like a lot of the sort of matte painting of I can't remember, when they're walking through the gates and there's like flowers and trees on things, and there's like the little weird creatures, like the snake creature, not snake, what was it, I can't remember, like a little eel creature that was in the water. It's all like very little things that kind of help sell the story, but it was all done, you know, I think with a really gentle hand. I mean, even at the end where she's burning as well, you know, and the blood on her face, it's all sort of storytelling effects again, or sort of beautiful visuals, and not kind of heavy VFX, which I really like, which most of these films are like that, I feel. But yeah, I love that film. And if you're watching the cinema as well with the sound, in all the visuals at the end, it's really quite trippy, isn't it, I think?
Yeah.
It is super trippy. Like I actually first watched Annihilation with my brother, and that was his first comment, like, this is the trippiest film, but he loved it.
I sound like bleeding in my ears, and like these visuals are coming at me. I was like, Jesus, I had to look at the floor a couple of times, because it's quite in the face.
I really appreciated what you said about the subtlety of the hand and working on the visual effects, because it's so immersive. Because of that, you really feel as if you're being drawn into a world. Instead of looking at it, you're drawn in because of the subtleties and the nuances. And yeah, that was great.
Absolutely.
Very great.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was really well done, and it's a beautiful looking film for it.
Mm-hmm. Kelly, you had a question about changes in the industry.
Yes. So Sarah, obviously you mentioned earlier that, you know, you were very fortunate to have some great mentors and, you know, people who, you know, helped you up the ladder. But, you know, for the other women that you briefly mentioned who kind of have struggled, how have you seen, you know, changes in the industry and changes in VFX for women in particular sort of change over the years? And are there any, you know, further changes that you would like to see where that's concerned, or even, you know, for diversity in general, as you mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest change, you know, since when I started, as you said, 2 decades ago, you know, there wasn't any kind of education or training courses or no visibility towards what we do as an industry. And the biggest change for me, I think, is education, which is really important. But there's so many, what's the word, you know, groups kind of going into schools early and teaching children, you know, about the sort of science and the creativity of what we do, you know, and bringing it to children, or, you know, at that age, so that I don't think people are aware of the jobs you could do, certainly not in VFX anyway. When I first started, no one really knew. As like I said, when the guy said to me, you know, it's all full of men and geeks, which is, you know, not true at all. So it's kind of that accessibility. I think visibility is really important. And also like mentoring. So one thing I've got into, you know, over the last few years is put myself forward to mentor or mentor people, which I think is really important, because when I was managing like the department for Milk, you know, some of the girls that came through, it was really interesting. There's all the men in the department would come and ask for a pay rise, like with no problem, no qualms, like no fear about it. And there was a couple of the girls that did, but there's this one girl that never once in the year came to me and asked me for any of that. And everybody else in the department had asked me. And in the end, I took her into a room and I was like, I've got to tell you, you're the only person that hasn't come and asked me for a pay rise. Why not? She was like, you know, and she was just said she felt too nervous and wasn't comfortable, didn't know how to approach it, you know, which was really interesting. So I was like, and I think if people have access to, you know, more experienced people that could, you know, mentor them and give them advice, then, you know, and try and catch these people and help them along, I think that makes a big difference. And there's a lot more, you know, like women, like in kind of high roles that are bringing that sort of visibility and accessibility to diversity, which really helps as well. So I think, you know, just keep talking about it and pushing stuff through, and the visibility, you know, really helps. So yeah, I hope it keeps changing. I've already seen the difference for me over the last few years, so I think it's definitely working. It's just keeping at it and keep talking about it.
So what for there are women who might be on this Zoom right now, and for women who want to get into visual effects, what do you suggest they do to prepare? What path is best for them to take?
I mean, it depends. You know, like I said, if they're doing, there's a lot of film courses now you can do, obviously, at uni. There's lots of private courses you can do as well and pay for. You know, photography or science is always a good way to get into it, art. You know, there's lots of organisations you can get in touch with. There's Access VFX, which I think is a global company now, which gives a lot of advice. Internships, you know, I started as a runner. There weren't any courses, sorry. So it kind of learned on the job, which was great. So I think it's just being proactive, you know, really kind of wanting it and having that ambition to do it. And just there's so many accessible people to talk to and organisations to go and you know, get information from. Yeah, I think just having a passion for it and just go for it, basically.
And I love that too, what you're saying, but also about, you know, just owning your power as a woman, not only just asking for a raise, but that you have a right to be a visual effects artist and to be working with, even if there are a lot of men. So I love what you just went in there, I think, and just did what you had a passion for. And that goes a long way to helping to empower us. But I think a lot of women artists, especially in the horror genre, because we've been told, oh, it's not for us. You know, we can, even though we're, you know, half the audience for it, that we're not really the ones who can create great horror. And of course we can. We see it again and again with the directors and you know, behind the scenes, behind the camera artists like you. But we have to own that as we're moving up and as we're, you know, mentoring. I think that's really key, I think, for us to move forward. So thank you for pushing that message. That's great. I don't know if I have any other questions. I think aside from wanting to know what you can speak about, well, I have a lot of questions, but your upcoming projects, I don't know what you can mention. I know that some you can't, but anything that you can tell us about? And no,
not yet.
No,
oh, no, sorry. Not right now, because they're kind of all, there's a few different plates being spun at the moment. So, but exciting ones, that's all I can say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a question actually, because we do have quite a few filmmakers in Nick's Horror Collective, and I'm one of them. And I would love to work with you. If someone wanted to work with Milk, if there was a production company that one of us is working with that says, yeah, we'd love to work with a woman, you know, visual artist, how would we approach you if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, you can get in touch with Milk. I can give you an email address, basically. But I'd love to, yeah. I love horror. So if anybody's got anything they want to make, I'd love to work with you. I can give you details, maybe to pass on to people, if that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Should we tackle some of the audience questions?
I think so.
Okay, so we're going to start with Emily. Emily has two questions. So Emily, I will unmute you and we'll tackle your first question and let Sarah answer that, then we'll get to your second one. Sound good?
Yeah. Hey.
I
And sorry, I was eating before, that's why I was on no video or whatever. But yeah, my first question is, how was Fantastic Beasts like working on that and stuff?
It's terrible. No, it wasn't. It was brilliant. It's great. You know, I loved Harry Potter films, and that for me is like an adult Harry Potter for me. Christian Mantz, who's the VFX supervisor on that, I've worked with for many, many years as well. So it's always good when you feel like you're working with your friends. So he was the overall supervisor, and there was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 companies working on it. We were lucky enough to be one of them. So I, thoroughly enjoyed working on that, and I hope we get to work on the second one as well.
Mm. Oh wow! And a kind of a side question I just thought of is like, how do you go from like, you know, you see the creatures or like in your mind, like either in the script or the books or whatnot, until then actually like making them and stuff. Like, what's your like process?
So once we've kind of broke down the scripts and, you know, we've read it and we kind of get an idea of what this creature might look like, you know, we obviously speak to the director and the production designer, and everybody kind of says, well, I imagine it to be this. But what we tend to do is concept it first. We'll do a drawing, get sign off on that concept, and from there, you know, we then take it into 3D and model it and rig it so we can move it, and then you sort of texture it and light it. So it's kind of various stages, but we never build it without getting concept signed off first. Otherwise, you're just burning money, you know. So you always do a concept, get everybody to agree to it, and then you go ahead and build it.
Thanks. And then the second question, because like of COVID life and everything, like how has that affected your work, and what tools do you use, if any, to collaborate virtually? And then also just generally, what programs do you use to create visual effects as well?
Yeah, so I mean, COVID's been really interesting. Like when it all kicks off, no one kind of works remotely because of security issues and productivity, and there was all that, you know, it just wasn't heard of. Obviously, we had to. So for Milk, it was great. We were up and running within 2 weeks, like 180 people, which was like amazing. You know, thanks to our systems and pipelines guys and a lot of patience. So we use like Teradici boxes or VPN, you know, to work remotely with the company. Provided you got good internet, which we all do, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I mean, it was hard because I think like mental health wise for some people was really difficult to be sat working at home alone. But you know, we have like Zooms obviously or Hangouts, so people are constantly chatting to each other throughout the day, which is important. And it's just managing it in a different way to than, you know, if you're in the office. In terms of like software, you know, for the comp side of things, it's all Nuke based. And then 3D wise, it's many packages like Maya. We use Houdini for effects. Yeah, and then it's just the cloud rendering for everything. So it's just working out logistically different to being in an office, but it's surprisingly works very well during COVID. And actually, one good thing that's come out of it as well is because it's been kind of good and bad working from home remotely, it's allowed people to have a bit more of a life, you know, rather than doing like a 2-hour commute to get into an office, you know, you're at home. So, you know, we've talked about as a company not going back to full, you know, 5 days a week, you know, once we get back out of normality, and maybe hot desking and having, you know, the ability that people can maybe do 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, and mixing it all up a little bit, which I think will be better, you know, better way of life for everybody, hopefully. But, you know, we're kind of toying with that now because of this whole lockdown. So that's one good thing to come out of it, I guess.
Thanks so much.
Great.
And then next is Lisa. Lisa has a great question about screenwriting. Let's just unmute you. Sorry, Lisa, my fault. There we go.
I'm the walking cliche about the person who doesn't unmute themselves. Hi, Sarah. First of all, thank you so much for your time. It's so generous, and it is just so, it's exciting. Even if it wasn't in COVID, you know, quarantine times, it's very exciting for me to get the chance to listen to you. My question was about screenwriting. When you're looking at that first pass at a screenplay where you're going to have to translate, you know, what's on the page to what people will actually see, are there things that are particularly helpful or not helpful? Or are you like, I have no idea what the screenwriter is thinking when they're describing this creature, or does it even matter? Is it at that point, unless the writer is also the director, is it more just a soft suggestion and you just go from there and create your own creature? How much collaboration is there, or is that over? And what particular words or phrases help you do your job better to make that vision happen?
So initially, yeah, we'll read the scripts, and I think, everybody has their own vision. If you read a book or a script, you've got your own kind of idea of what that is. But we'd initially read the scripts, but we wouldn't do anything until we'd had that conversation with the director, the writer, the producer, whoever you have that initial conversation with. But I think when you're reading the scripts, normally whenever I've read stuff about like creatures, there's generally been like a small paragraph, like it had black oily eyes and long hairy legs, or there'll be something in there that gives you kind of an indication. And if not, it's totally fine. It doesn't make any difference, because I don't know, maybe we'll know from the action that it crawls or it leaps or it walks, so it gives you an idea of what kind of form it's going to have from that. But to be honest, we never do anything creative until we've had that initial conversation. And there'll already be rough drawings generally from production. Someone's just, I don't know, hand drawn an idea, and then we just take it from there. But we wouldn't do that without first collaborating with everybody on it.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up question. Is there ever a time where you're in between thinking this would be an actor in some kind of prosthetics, or this is like, we would obviously always do this pure special effects? Do you lean towards using not effects when you can get away with it, or do you think effects would make it even better in this instance?
Again, it all depends. I mean, the big one is the budget. We've worked on shows which story's fantastic, but the budget isn't there. A lot of the TV shows, but the ideas are great. You've only got a certain amount of money for a few key moments when the creature kind of comes up close, or it's talking, or it's animated, which you don't want to do with prosthetics, personally, because they're very expensive and you're committed and you can't change it. So if it's budget's an issue, then you talk about clever ways. Maybe you see it silhouetted, in which case you get away with some kind of suit or puppeteering, and you save the money for your key 3 shots. But if it's like a big budget movie and it's the kind of sexy part of the film, or it's a hero character or something, then it depends what the creature looks like. We've done like stuff where someone's been dressed in full green suit and we replaced everything, or we've captured as their performance, which is really important. Or we've done a partial replacement where maybe we've just changed the head. Maybe it's like a man wolf, so we've changed the head as a CG wolf because we want it to animate and the eyes and the ears to do whatever it needs to do. So again, that's why it's really important to have this collaboration and talk about budgets and be kind of honest, not kind of hiding stuff from each other. And for me, our job is to collaborate with the client and sort of say, look, we want to help you make this. So rather than shooting 50 shots of this, how about you just try doing this instead and save your money for these shots or this scene? So it's very much, it has to be talked about in a collaboration and coming up with the best cost effective and visually best looking way of telling that story, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great questions, Lisa. I know that there are a lot of screenwriters and screenwriter hybrids on this call, so that was very helpful. Next is Anne. Anne has a question about working with VFX vendors.
Hi, first of all, thank you for doing this. This has been wonderful, so I really appreciate it. So yeah, my question was, you mentioned a couple of times that you're working with other vendors on a production, specifically other special effects vendors. So I'm curious how that works in terms of like, are you collaborating with them? Is it all kind of separate? Do you usually pitch for like specific parts of the job, or does the director approach you for specific parts? I'd just be curious how that all comes together and how you work with the other teams to kind of make it all come together.
Okay, so on the old guard, because I was the overall supervisor, I got to pick the vendors, and a lot of companies or a lot of clients, rather than sticking all their eggs in one basket in one company, prefer to, and again depending on how big the show is, prefer to have 2, 3 or 4 vendors working on it. So So every vendor will all get the same scripts, and they'll all bid the same scripts, because you need comparative bids anyway, for the client to sort of see. And it's interesting to see how everybody bids differently, and where they're putting the money, and the methodology is quite important. After that, it's then down to the producers and director. They look at the scenes, and maybe, NPC, let's say their creature work is fantastic, so maybe you go, well, our key hero creature, we're going to put those shots with NPC, but like all the environment stuff, let's say Milk are great environments, as an example, we're going to give them all the environment work. And what tends to happen, which you try not to do because it gets messy, is not have shots that cross over 2 or 3 different vendors. But it happens because inevitably the creature that the one company is doing is going into an environment the other company is doing. So then you get to the decision of, do you get the company doing the environments to share those assets with the people doing their creature, or do they work on their shot and then pass it over? So, I mean, in London, all the companies all know each other, and we've worked with DNEG, Framestore, on various shows, and shared assets and shots, and it works fine. Everybody's grown up about it, and we do it to the best way possible. So it's never really an issue, and it's just down to what the client wants. And as a vendor, whether we're a vendor and we're just coming onto a show and being brought in by the director, is great as well, because you work on a package of shots. Or if what I did on the old goal, I was the overall and I got to pick the vendors, was also great. And it's kind of like you have a chat and you discuss the show with these people, and then you see who fits the best and who you think is going to do the job in the right way for you. If that helps answer your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you. That was really interesting.
Okay, and next we have Shelley, who has a genre-specific question. Oh. Sorry, Shelley, hang on. I think I just accidentally muted you. I meant to unmute you.
That's
there.
okay. I can't tell if it's me or you doing it. Sorry. Hi, Sarah. Kind of a sloppily articulated question, but just geeking out over your work as an artist, are there any kind of visual effects, beats, or moments you wish you could do more of, or that in the industry, especially in genre film, horror and sci-fi, you wish people did more of? Like, I'm not talking about budget or practicality. If you had all the resources, what do you love doing and wish more filmmakers did?
I mean, I love creature work. I do. When I first started at Multibeam Film, we did Doctor Who, and there was always like some crazy, hybrid creature in that, which was great fun to do. I mean, are you talking about in terms of like see more effects, or just
like Annihilation for me was such the strange experience, because you weren't just focusing on the details of a particular creature or an effect of, Tessa transmorphing into plant material. It was the environment. And I know a few people who work for Framestore and other effects companies, and they're usually given like a character, a creature. And I didn't know if you just felt like, God, I wish horror filmmakers did more of this, or I really want to work on textures for this, or maybe film experiences that were just missing a certain pizzazz that you knew you could go in and do.
I see what you mean. Yeah, so more immersive, which you're absolutely right, like Annihilation, because it wasn't just some weird plant or one thing or the other. Right. Everything was affected. Everything was thought about in detail. No, you're absolutely right. And you don't notice. I think you're right. You don't notice that something's been treated, for example, or thought about, because you're just so engrossed in what's going on. It all feels like you're in that. It's immersive. So I think more of that would be like the subtleties. The stuff like, even when I've, worked on films, and maybe we've looked, you look at shots and sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. You're so blinded by, let's say, the one character you're talking about. And then someone comes up with an idea of like, wouldn't it be interesting just adding in the smallest thing? And suddenly it just like brings to life the shot in a different way, which you have done, done it before. And if you have a good collaborative team, your director and your producer and your editor, they're all open for it. And it becomes, they're like, oh, why don't we try this? That's more exciting for me than just like, right, here's a script, here's a story. As you said, I want this creature, this matte painting. It evolves as you go along in that film process. And especially when you get to the edit suite, and that's what I always find really interesting. And providing you haven't sort of blown all your money and time, then just keep going forever and noodling. So yeah, I would definitely love to see more of that very sort of, you know, gentle detail being added into, yeah, films, I guess, which you can do with sci-fi because it, you know, it lends, or horror, you know, because you can have that kind of fantasy, or not even fantasy, you know, just something immersive about it and beautiful. So yes, more of that, definitely.
Well, just a follow-up question on that then. Do you find getting in the conversation earlier is easier with genre filmmakers because they don't feel as territorial, like this is an assembly line and you only come in at stage, you know, X?
100%.
Okay.
100%. The films that I've been involved with where VFX has been an afterthought are the ones that just are not a nice process for either side, because it's frustrating, because, you know, it hasn't been thought about, and maybe we could have saved money early on, or ideas, you know, that we could have come up with in the pre-production and shoot stage, which is almost kind of in hindsight it's too late, or it's going to be done in a bad way, which won't, you know, it should always be, you should always get everybody involved from the beginning, because it makes for a much better process, more enjoyable experience, and also just looks so much better for it. So yeah, I hate coming onto things later on. Yes.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you so much.
I actually have a follow-up question to that in terms of what you might want to see. Is there anything on the horizon in terms of new technology for visual effects that you're really excited about or would like to see?
Well, I mean, I think the obvious one is a virtual production, which I think has been going on at the moment, but which I do like a lot. And I think it's, again, it's immersive for the filmmakers that are shooting, because they get to be part of the visual effects process early on, which is generally, you know, it's only of the director and the editor maybe at the end that get involved with that. So I think that's exciting in the right, you know, for the right way and the right reasons, because it's very expensive and you don't necessarily always need to use it. Remote working, you know, cloud-based, you know, the global, people working globally from all over the place right now, which is great, and not, you know, having to be sat in an office with a machine, you know, being noisy under your desk, everything up in the cloud, I think is all exciting. And just like the virtual reality side of things, I mean, there's lots of stuff going on at the moment, and it's kind of nice to see where it's all going, and, you know, where people are being innovative and using it in the right way. So yeah, I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about virtual reality, 3D, and if you've touched and worked in any of that.
No, I mean, we did some tests like a year ago. I think we worked on Sherlock for a long time, so we took a scene just to see how it would work with the whole headset, which is quite fun. So we have looked into it, but we've done like one project for a game, but we haven't really. Again, if you can't, you know, it's like being a jack of all trades and a master of none. We can't sort of spread ourselves into every area. So, you know, at the moment, Unreal and the virtual side of things is really interesting. So we've been pushing our pipeline with that, because I think it's not going away. But, you know, in terms of the virtual reality side, it's just not, you know, not something we're going to be focused on right now. There's other companies that are throwing themselves into that. But I think, again, it's, you know, it's very interesting. But yeah, not for us at the moment.
Cool.
I have a question about Adrift, actually, because you mentioned earlier it was one of the more challenging projects that you worked on because of the water. Can you share, you know, why water is so difficult to create?
I mean, it's because it's so physical, and it's all based on physics and lighting, which is a really difficult thing to generate. And, you know, and it's not until you start looking into it, you don't really think about it. But, you know, to do like a stormy ocean convincingly, the layers to it are, and the way the light hits the water, and it's see-through, the water, you know, the light refracts through water, and then you've got like aeration underneath the water, which is that sort of greeny color. You've got bubbles, you've got foam, the way the foam breaks apart and reforms. It's such a difficult thing to get. I mean, it's much better now than it used to be, but it's, you know, it's a really tricky thing. It's basically, it's like maths and physics, and, you know, the effects guys that did it for Adrift, I mean, are like complete geniuses. You know, I'm definitely more creative and not that side of things, but it's just, it takes a lot of time, and it's not an instantly visual process, because you're generating what we call caches. So, and it's all looks very dull while it's generating. It takes hours and hours and hours, and then by the time you render it, you know, you're like, oh god, that looks terrible, let's start again. And, you know, and so it's a whole patient, very clever, very difficult thing to do. And this is why I'm like really proud of it, because it looks, you know, we can always improve stuff, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it was perfect in any way, but just, you know, you really have to look at the physics of it, and it's just a difficult thing. You know, it must be stuff you've watched with water or oceans that you're like, there's just something that's not quite believable, or you know, they've just covered it in loads of fog and spray, you know, which always looks great because you're not concentrating too much on all the details. So that's why, if that makes any sense, it was just a very, very technical, big technical pipeline to set up. And there's a company called Scanline that have been doing water for years, so they have a whole pipeline dedicated to it, because it's just not a simple thing to pick up, like, you know, dropping in a lovely blue sky with clouds or some sun. It's, you know, it's a very physical, heavy thing to generate and look beautiful, or good and real, basically.
You almost treated water like it was a character, which I think is the way it works.
It is, yeah, absolutely, yeah. For the believability of it and for it to feel real, you know, you have to study how it, you know, how it reacts and works, and yeah.
I got vaguely terrified when you mentioned maths and physics, just because that's not my strong point.
Exactly.
Oh God, we gotta do this.
It's not like coloring in, it's like sit and watch these numbers and generate, yeah. So.
We have another audience question from Jenna. So Jenna, I'm going to unmute you whenever you're ready.
Okay, hopefully my video will turn on in 2 seconds. My question is, with quarantine happening and a lot of people locked down and brainstorming tiny projects, even stuff to shoot in their own apartments, are there any low or no budget effects that you turn to that could really bring production value to a tiny film, especially with horror?
Hi, Jenna.
Hi.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I get this correct, so we've got like so most, you know, post houses will have like a library of elements that they've used on many shows, and you kind of collect it, which is great. You know, you always come back and use, I don't know, we've got hundreds of clips of blood, for example, blood spray, blood splat, blood pools, every kind of blood you can think of, which is great. So for low budget, and which we have done before, we've done like friends films, you know, or people with not a lot of money, but they've, you know, the film looks great and the story's good. So we've kind of just dipped into a library, which if you've already got something that's created, you know, you could use that within a shot, then it's relatively cheap. It's just a bit of manpower to pop it into the shots. So yeah, if that answers your question, it's just having a library of assets. And,
Okay.
and like I said, most posts have that, yeah. And we just delve into that sort of bag of tricks and use those to keep everything, you know, cost effective, I guess.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Another great question. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
I had another question.
If you have something you want to ask or something,
If
and
it's
I'm
okay.
not seeing you,
Sorry,
you know,
sorry, Emily. I think we were getting some feedback from your end, so I muted you. I apologize. But let's just see if we can get that cleaned up a bit. Okay, let's try again. Let me unmute you.
Is now better? I have another thing starting, but I canceled it. I'll join in.
Yes, much better. That's great. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So my other question is just like generally, like if you have any like tips for like networking. Like I personally I don't have problem like meeting people, like finding people, like especially like online, everything's online and like just finding spaces. But like let's say you're in a space with people who maybe they're in the filmmaking process, but maybe they're like random, like they're not necessarily like you're someone that you'd have a lot to talk about with. So like any like tips for like conversations, and then also like other spaces to meet people who might be in a position of to like, you know, collaborate with or work on different things, you know what I mean? Just generally like tips for things.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is a great forum, and you know, it's kind of just, you don't necessarily like, okay, there's something in London called Women in Film. I'm pretty sure everybody's got it in every country, some form of that. Yeah. And it's, you know, and it's women in film and TV, and it's across the board really. It's investors, it's writers, it's photographers, it's a whole mix of people, and those are, for me, really good. I mean, I love going to those, and people come on their own, they don't know each other, and it's, you know, you have a glass of wine and just, it's basically just, you know, starting off a conversation, you know, hi, what do you do, and just finding a bit of common ground. And I always find, I I've met like really interesting people that I've had, you know, stayed in touch with, who aren't necessarily in the film industry, but, you know, have gone to like, you know, women being empowered kind of groups and trying to find people or women that are inspiring and just learning about different, I don't know, areas of whether it's gaming or music or whatever that may be. So I think just go to as many, you know, not right now, obviously because we're in COVID, but you do Zoom groups. Just going out and just, yeah, going to these sort of events and getting online with things and just generally chatting to people and just making conversation. Sorry if that helps. Does that answer your question?
I will jump in here if that's okay. So for those who may not know, we have our own equivalent of that here. It is Women in Media. I'm going to dump their website into the chat box. This is a fantastic organization. Sara has worked with them before and participated in their events. That's actually how we were fortunate enough to meet her, was through one of the Women in Media events. There is an annual membership, which you don't have to pay, but it will definitely get you great discounts. Otherwise, you can still attend their virtual events, their in-person events. And yeah, they have an excellent database as well. So if you do join at the membership level, you will become part of their database and part of their hiring system to help get women work in the film industry.
And to find women to work with on your projects as well.
Yes, yes. Any other questions from the audience? No? Okay, I have one more that I think will be a good note to close out on, or at least I hope it will. So Sara, earlier you talked about visibility within VFX, you know, for women, for BIPOC people, LGBTQ+, et cetera, but just everybody in general. And I noticed that, you know, when I was reading up on Possessor, and everybody was just praising the visual effects, you know, they in turn praised, and rightfully so, Brandon Cronenberg, cinematographer Kareem Hussein, Rupert Lazarus, the production designer, but there was no mention of your partner and colleague and the work that he did as the VFX supervisor. And I feel like that tends to be the case, sadly, that VFX supervisors really don't get the recognition, you know, for their contributions. So how can the rest of us, how can we, you know, help elevate visibility of you and your colleagues and fellow supervisors and artists?
Well, I mean, to be honest, on that film in particular, I think it was more because it was, you know, it was special effects and it was in camera. So that was the big key thing. I mean, the visual effects on the film, to be honest, wasn't big at all in terms of, you know, it looks like it, but it's just, you know, the way they shot it was so beautiful. And what they use in the way they, you know, the special effects. So I don't know, I've always found, I mean, credits are always a funny thing. So generally the VFX soup and the producer always get credit, whether it's, you know, front end credit or at the end. Getting all the artists on is quite difficult. So for example, when we did Harry Potter, when I was at Mill Film, they couldn't, and they do it based on however many shots you generate for the film, you get so many credits, which is never enough, you know, because it's always like 30, 40, 50, 100 people have worked on it, let's say. So what we did, or what Mill Film did at that time, was take out a spread in Cinefex, you know, and thank everybody that way and just put all their names in there, which was lovely. I thought it was a really nice thing to do. And I think for artists first starting off, and get credits are really important. So, you know, it's really difficult to get, or it was really difficult to get credits. So IMDb, LinkedIn, you know, is brilliant for that. And that gets people visibility. And I know, you know, a lot of the clients search, you know, over on LinkedIn or IMDb for people. So I think that's good. I just, it's difficult with credits because you just can't fit everybody in, I guess. Yeah, so I think there's other ways to get visibility for people.
Well, please keep us posted on your projects, and we will always happily promote and elevate and celebrate you and your team.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Great.
Yeah, and you've got my details, so if anybody wants to get in touch, please do. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. It's amazing to watch. We look forward to seeing what's coming next.
Yes, and
me too.
Sorry, just a quick note for everybody. This has been recorded, so if you joined late and you you know, weren't able to catch the full conversation, this will go up on the Nick's YouTube channel, hopefully this coming week. But yeah, fingers crossed. But thank you everybody for joining. Big thank you to Sara for taking the time to sit down with us today and share your insights and experiences. And yeah, have a lovely weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.